Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. When it comes to elections, there's little more exciting for either party than flipping a state, especially a state which has previously been thought of as a red or blue stronghold. One state that's been put in the spotlight over the last few years is Texas, with the state appearing to be increasingly purple in recent elections. So much so that some have speculated that Biden could even win the state, making him the first Democrat to win Texas since Carter in 1976. So in this video, we're going to discuss if Texas can really turn blue, as well as a handful of other swing states. If you think you know better than the pollsters, you have only a few hours left to enter the TLDR Route to 270 competition. And if your election map matches the reality, you'll win over $100 of TLDR prizes, including some exclusive items, and because we're a British company, some British snacks and treats. Currently, the majority of respondents predict a Biden win, but for your chance of winning, click the link in the description and submit your map. Terms and conditions apply. Entries close tonight at midnight Eastern. Good luck. Before we take a look at Texas and the other battleground states in this election that could potentially flip, let's take a look at the whole map. Obviously, this is all based on polling, and we're taking our data here from Real Clear Politics. You're more than welcome to make the argument that we shouldn't be listening to polling and that polls are unreliable, but we're not debating that today, and we put two videos out on the topic, both of which are linked below. Anyway, let's take a look at the current state of the race based on recent polling. Biden has 8 so-called solid states, which account for 118 electoral college votes, while Trump has 10, representing 57 votes. Biden has 5 likelies on his side, representing 58 votes, while Trump has 6 states, representing 35. Then finally we have those states that are leaning one way or another. Biden has 7, representing 56 votes, and on the other side, Trump has 4, representing 33. Which leaves 11 somewhere in the middle, what Real Clear Politics describes as toss-ups, worth 181 electoral votes, enough to swing the whole thing. So let's put those 11 states in order and take a look at what's going on there, before we dive deeper into Texas specifically. If we put these states in order from most to least likely to vote for Trump, we have Texas, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Iowa, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. However, of these, only Texas and Ohio currently have polling averages in Trump's favour. Georgia is currently looking like a dead heat, and the other 8 are all more likely to vote for Biden. So, with Texas marked as the least likely swing state to flip, why are some so hopeful about Biden's odds in the state? Well, firstly, it's worth taking into account the margin of error of all of these states. It's common and even expected that polls will have a 3-point margin of error, meaning the final results could end up swinging 3 points either way. That's important here because all but 3 swing states fall within that margin of error, meaning that the polls could just be off and the states could all swing the other way. Importantly for this video, Texas does fall within that margin, which is especially hopeful for Biden considering that his polling has been improving in the state in recent days. Well, more specifically, Trump's polling has been getting worse. Either way, these polls aren't exactly locked down. We're not looking at a California or Alabama polling here. So, with polls across Texas showing quite different results, there's still a possibility that Biden could pick up the state. That's at least in part because of what I mentioned earlier in this video. Texas and some other states are getting more purple, and that's partly down to demographic changes. Texas is currently the 7th fastest growing state in the union. It's the 2nd largest by both land and population, and is home to 29 million people. For context, that means Texas has more people in it than Australia. My point is that Texas is big. Specifically, 38 electoral college votes big. And perhaps most importantly, it's also very diverse. And not every piece of that pie is growing at an equal rate. And when people talk about this in Texas, they tend to mean the Hispanic population, and this is not without good reason. Between 2010 and 2018, the Texas population grew by about 4 million people, and 53.6% of that growth came from the Hispanic community. And like most people who aren't white men, Hispanics tend to skew Democratic. Now, Texas has had a large Hispanic population for pretty much its entire existence. So what makes this different is, well, it comes down to two factors. Firstly, obviously, the simple fact that there are just more people now. And not only do these new people tend to skew Hispanic, they also skew young, as new additions to populations rather tend to do. And as you've probably noticed by now, young people aren't exactly known for their strong conservatism. Then there's the more inherently political aspect. Put simply, a higher proportion of people are voting. In the 2018 midterms, during which the incredibly contentious Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke occurred, we saw voter turnout in Texas increase by 18 points in comparison to past midterms. This year, that trend appears set to continue. As of Thursday, 8.45 Texans had already cast their votes. For context, 8.97 million Texans voted in 2016 overall, like including Election Day. Saying that a lot of Texans are voting this year is perhaps putting it mildly. To summarise, there are three main things to keep in mind here. 1. The rising population, especially in terms of the proportion of Hispanics to whites. 2. The number of young people. And 3. The turnout levels. All of these things would point to a bettering of state affairs for Joe Biden. But Democrats, don't get too excited just yet. It should be pointed out here that the Hispanic community is far more politically diverse than it's often made out to be. A recent New York Times Siena College poll had 34% of Texans who identified as Hispanic or Latino voting for Trump. And this shouldn't be particularly surprising. In fact, that's exactly the percentage of the Hispanic vote that Trump garnered in the state in 2016. The difference now is where the Democrat is. Hillary Clinton won 61% of Texas Hispanics. According to the aforementioned New York Times poll, Joe Biden sits at 57%, a number that one might note is in fact less than 61. So, while overall trends look good for Democrats in the long term, I would not recommend counting out Trump in Texas just yet. Perhaps Biden will win the state, but it's very far from guaranteed. A similar state of affairs can be found in Georgia, the other surprisingly competitive, historically red state. Like Texas, Georgia has very gradually been trending blue over the past few years, and for pretty similar reasons too. From 2010 to 2018, the percentage of the Georgia electorate composed of white voters dropped by 5 points, from 63% to 58%. The percentage composed of black voters rose by about a point, from 31 to 32. And even more so than Hispanics, African Americans tend to skew quite heavily Democratic. Now, these might seem like small numbers, but when you add in increased turnout, you start to see where Biden's numbers might come from. Like Texas, Georgia saw a competitive race in 2018, this time between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp for governor. And this race increased turnout massively. And again this year, the state may surpass 2016's total statewide turnout in early votes alone. Again, this doesn't guarantee a Biden victory in the state, but it certainly indicates a good long-term trend for Democrats and gives Biden supporters some cause for hope. It is worth noting though that Biden doesn't really need to win these more out-there states though. The solid, likely and lean Biden states give the former vice president a combined 232 electoral college votes, meaning that he only needs 38 more votes to reach the hallowed 270. If we start by assigning him the most likely to win swing states in the order we discussed earlier, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nevada and Pennsylvania take Biden across the line, without the need of Texas, Iowa, Ohio or Georgia. However, that doesn't mean that Biden couldn't win there too, and if he did, the results would be known a little quicker, and we likely wouldn't have to wait days or even weeks for a clear winner. But while Biden might not need to win these states, winning them would be incredibly symbolic. Democrats have been talking about growth in the South for years, so actually winning Texas and/or Georgia would be a sign of impressive strength in the area. Winning other more red states, like Ohio or Iowa on the other hand, would significantly counterweight the argument that Democrats are losing ground in the Midwest, and be another sign of good things to come for the party. Also, practically, winning these states would help candidates down ballot. If Democrats were to win these tougher, more traditionally red states, it would likely also mean that there were significant House and Senate gains in these states, something which could lead to the Democrats not only winning a trifecta, but could also potentially give them enough leeway in the Senate to pass legislation even when their own senators vote against them. So Biden doesn't need to flip Texas, which is a good thing because he likely won't. He also doesn't need to win Georgia, by the way. But the fact that it's being discussed is a good sign for the party and Biden's shot at the White House. That doesn't mean that Trump can be ruled out just yet, though. As we explain in our video on the topic, linked down below, Trump can still get to the 270 votes he needs. It just doesn't look as clean and easy as he might like, but it's still possible. What do you think? Does Biden really stand a chance of flipping Texas? Or is it just a Democratic pipe dream? What about other more red states, like Ohio, Georgia and Iowa? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, as well as how you expect the election to play out across the country. Also, remember you have until midnight Eastern tonight to enter TLDR's Route to 270 competition. The link to enter is in the description. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be updated on our election coverage as it happens. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of the videos, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.